Title: The Walsh Family Medical Empire, Part 1, The Bodies Beneath the Ice. Duration: 30 minutes. Audience: American YouTube viewers. Tone: simple, engaging, dark historical horror. Engaging hook 2 minutes. In the fall of 1834, a dock worker unloading cargo at Baltimore's Inner Harbor pulled open a crate packed in salt and ice. What he found inside wasn't fish or imported goods, it was human bodies. 17 of them, perfectly preserved, each one cut open with surgical precision. At first, it looked like a shipment of medical specimens. The crate was bound for Europe, labeled as educational material from St. Thomas Medical University in rural Maryland. But something didn't sit right with the dock worker. One of the bodies had a scar he recognized. It belonged to his nephew, a young man who had supposedly died of fever while studying at that very university. What started as a strange shipping mix-up quickly exploded into one of the darkest medical scandals in American history. A 36-year web of secrets, murder, and betrayal. Over $800,000 made in blood money, worth $25 million today. At the center of it all was the Walsh family. Their Catholic medical school wasn't just training doctors, it was feeding the anatomy labs of Europe with bodies that didn't come from cemeteries, but from their own students. If you're drawn to the chilling corners of American history, the real stuff they never taught in school, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. And tell me in the comments, what state are you listening from? I love hearing from truth seekers all across the country. Now, let's uncover what really happened behind the brick walls of St. Thomas Medical University. Part 1 to 28 minutes. Chapter 1. The Holy Mission. St. Thomas Medical University was founded in 1798 in the quiet hills of western Maryland, about 40 miles from Baltimore. To most, it looked like a noble mission, a Catholic medical school built to educate young Irish and German immigrant boys in the art of healing. The founder, Michael Walsh, had studied medicine in Dublin before coming to America with big dreams. He stood tall, over 6 feet, with icy blue eyes and neatly combed silver hair. His reputation was solid, his sermons inspiring, and his school respected across the East Coast. But St. Thomas wasn't just a school, it was a family operation. His wife, Margaret Walsh, served as dean, a rare position for a woman in the 18th century. Educated in Edinburgh, she was known for her cold stare and unmatched knowledge of human anatomy. And then there was Dr. James Walsh, Michael's younger brother and head of the anatomy department. He wasn't flashy, but he was a master of precision and detail. His lectures were famous, not just for what he taught, but for the quality of the bodies he used to teach it. At a time when other schools struggled to find cadavers, St. Thomas somehow had a steady stream, fresh, clean, preserved perfectly. No one questioned it. After all, the school had a reputation to uphold. Chapter 2. A school like no other. Tuition was steep, $200 a year, when the average laborer made only $300. But students came from all over, poor families hoping to lift their sons into respected careers as Catholic doctors. The Walsh family offered work-study programs to those who couldn't afford the full cost. These boys would clean, cook, and sometimes help in the labs. Unlike other institutions that focused on theory, St. Thomas emphasized hands-on experience. Students were dissecting human bodies almost daily. By the time they graduated, their surgical skills were top tier. And it worked. Graduates from St. Thomas quickly found jobs in hospitals, clinics, and as private physicians. The town of Emmitsburg, where the school was located, thrived. Local families rented rooms to students. Merchants made money. Priests welcomed the school with open arms. But behind the prayers, lectures, and community charm, something else was happening. Chapter 3. The First Disappearance. Just a year after the university opened, in the spring of 1799, a 19-year-old student named Patrick O'Brien vanished. Patrick was from Boston. His family had scraped together everything they had to send him to St. Thomas. He was smart, determined, and deeply religious. He dreamed of becoming a surgeon and returning to Boston to open a clinic for the poor. But Patrick began to feel uneasy. His roommate, Thomas Mackenzie, would later recall how Patrick had started hearing strange sounds coming from the anatomy lab at night. Whispering, movement, the sound of metal against bone. Patrick also said Dr. James Walsh had begun showing him special procedures in advanced dissection, techniques he had never read about in any textbook. On May 15, 1799, Patrick left his dorm around 9 p.m., telling Thomas he was headed to the lab for a late-night session. He never came back. When Thomas reported it the next morning, Michael Walsh personally stepped in. He told students that Patrick had suffered a breakdown from the stress. That he'd come to the lab, broken down in tears, and decided to abandon his studies. Michael claimed Patrick left on foot before sunrise, taking only a few belongings. He even said Patrick left a handwritten note, one that asked the university not to contact his family out of shame. That note was never shown to anyone. Chapter 4. A family's grief, a university's silence. 2 weeks later, Patrick's parents arrived from Boston. His father, a dock worker, was furious. He said his son would never have left without a word. Patrick had just written to them days earlier, talking excitedly about his exams. Dr. Margaret Walsh met with them briefly, cold and firm. She repeated the same story and said Patrick's possessions had already been donated to charity, as per his wishes. The O'Briens demanded an investigation. But Sheriff William Hawkins, who was close friends with the Walshes, conducted only a brief one. He interviewed students, read Patrick's school records, and accepted the Walshes' version of events. Case closed. What no one knew then, not Patrick's parents, not his classmates, not even the sheriff, was that Patrick had indeed gone to the anatomy lab that night. And he never came out. End of Part 1. Teaser for Part 2. In the next episode, we'll follow the disturbing pattern that began with Patrick O'Brien, and how dozens of other, missing, students would soon follow. We'll also uncover how the Walsh family's secret trade in human remains grew into a transatlantic business, turning a sacred institution into a silent slaughterhouse for science. Make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next will change how you look at history, medicine, and even faith itself. Recap plus short hook 1 minute. Last time, we uncovered the horrifying truth behind the disappearance of Patrick O'Brien, a bright young student who vanished in the spring of 1799 from St. Thomas Medical University. His body didn't just disappear, it was sold, preserved, packed in ice, and shipped across the Atlantic to a medical school in Edinburgh. And Patrick, he had walked willingly into what he thought was an anatomy review. It wasn't a review, it was his execution. Now in Part 2, we go deeper, into the hidden laboratory, the precision murders, the embalming secrets, and the growing empire built by the Walsh family, one cadaver at a time. Part 2. The Hidden Chamber, 28 minutes. Chapter 1. Behind the Bookshelf. Patrick O'Brien's final steps led him into a place no student was ever meant to see, a private laboratory hidden behind a false bookshelf in Dr. James Walsh's office. This basement chamber did not exist on any blueprints. There were no windows, no natural light, only gas lanterns that flickered against stone walls and iron tables. This room was designed for one purpose only: to kill, preserve, and package human bodies. James Walsh called it the comprehensive examination. But it wasn't an exam, it was a trap. And Patrick wasn't the first to walk into it. He was just the beginning. Chapter 2. The Perfect Crime. James Walsh had been studying chemical preservation techniques for years, using contacts from his time in Edinburgh and Paris. But it was chloroform, a new anesthetic, that changed everything. He discovered how to administer just enough to render a man unconscious, then slowly shut down his lungs without leaving a single bruise or mark. To Patrick, it was just part of the lesson. To James, it was the beginning of an enterprise. Once Patrick lost consciousness, James drained his blood, filled the arteries with a mercury arsenic solution, treated his organs with alcohol, and coated the body with an external fluid to maintain color and texture. The result? A perfect anatomical specimen, preserved, silent, worth $500 to the right buyer in Europe. Chapter 3. Anatomy of a Conspiracy. Within weeks, Patrick's body was on a ship to Edinburgh, packed in salt and sawdust, labeled as educational materials. It passed through customs without question. Back in Maryland, the Walsh family buried the truth beneath forged letters, false academic records, and stories of shame and failure. And just like that, the system was born. Over the next decade, the pattern became a business. Students were chosen based on isolation, distance from family, and financial need. They were invited into special training programs when they started to struggle. Chloroform, embalming, ice, and silence took care of the rest. By 1810, they had killed 43 students. The Walsh family had made over $200,000 in corpse sales. That's nearly $5 million today. Chapter 4. The priest who asked too many questions. Then came a problem the Walsh family hadn't counted on, a man named Father Timothy O'Malley. In 1811, this no-nonsense Irish priest arrived at St. Thomas Medical University. He wasn't fooled by the pious sermons or charitable donations. He had letters from 12 families across Boston and New York, all with the same story. Sons disappearing in the middle of the semester. Letters of shame, supposedly from the boys themselves. No follow-up, no goodbyes, nothing. Father O'Malley started asking questions. He spoke with students, faculty, even local shopkeepers. What he found disturbed him. Students spoke of strange noises from the basement. Whispers about secret study opportunities. And one troubling fact. Those who left the university always seemed happy, right before they disappeared. Chapter 5. Smoke and Mirrors. The Walsh family reacted fast. Michael Walsh, ever the politician, met Father O'Malley with warmth. He offered cooperation, explained the stress of medical life, claimed high standards naturally meant more dropouts. Margaret Walsh showed the priest student files, pages detailing academic failure and emotional breakdowns. But Father O'Malley noticed something odd. The handwriting, the ink, the timing. Too consistent, too clean, as if they were written all at once. He pressed harder, asked for the student letters, asked to inspect the basement. What he got was a stage show. Dr. James Walsh led him through the public labs, clean, well-equipped, and filled with legal cadavers. No secret room, no real answers. Chapter 6. Close Call. Behind the scenes, James spread rumors. Said Father O'Malley was mentally unwell, that he had a vendetta against science. Soon, anonymous letters arrived at the priest's quarters. Leave now, or lose everything. You're playing with something you can't stop. When Father O'Malley demanded a full inspection, Michael Walsh relented, but only showed him approved sections. The hidden chamber remained sealed. The preserved bodies were already on a ship by then. Frustrated and fearful, Father O'Malley filed a formal report with the Catholic authorities in Baltimore. Nothing happened. The Walsh family had friends in high places, donors, bishops, scholars. And their reputation, impeccable, but they knew they had come dangerously close to exposure. Chapter 7. Refinement and Expansion. In response, they downsized their kill count, only 4 victims per year now. They improved their cover stories. Selected victims from farther away. Began planting informants in the town and among the students. And they grew bolder. By 1815, they weren't just shipping to Europe. They had buyers in South America and the Caribbean. They raised prices, only chose the healthiest, most anatomically ideal students. Their embalming methods had become legendary, bodies so well preserved they were mistaken for sleeping patients. Chapter 8. Fame breeds danger. But success attracts attention. In 1820, a German anatomist named Drive Heinrich Zimmermann, from the University of Heidelberg, arrived in Baltimore. He'd been purchasing bodies from St. Thomas for years. He believed them to be the best preserved cadavers in the world. Now, he wanted to observe the preservation process firsthand. Zimmermann's arrival would change everything. Teaser for Part 3 to 1 minute. In Part 3, we follow Drive Zimmermann as he comes closer than anyone ever had to discovering the truth. And we'll learn what happened when the Walsh family realized they were being hunted by someone far more clever than Fr. O'Malley. Subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next, because when secrets this dark come to light, the only thing more terrifying than the truth is the price paid to keep it buried. Short recap plus fresh hook 1 minute. In Part 2, we uncovered the horrifying truth behind the Walsh family's human trafficking empire. From their hidden basement lab to their perfected embalming process, they had created a machine that turned poor students into highly profitable cadavers. By 1820, the Walshes were making thousands by supplying preserved bodies to Europe, South America, and beyond. Their system was clean, their methods were cruel, and their victims, always young, poor, and full of promise. But what they didn't expect was Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann, a brilliant anatomist from Germany. A man who had purchased their specimens, and now wanted to see where they came from. And that was a problem. Part 3. The German Visitor, 28 minutes. Chapter 1. Arrival in Baltimore. Dr. Heinrich Zimmermann arrived at the port of Baltimore in October 1820. He was tall, meticulous, and always carried a leather-bound journal. A respected professor of anatomy at the University of Heidelberg, Zimmermann had long admired the cadavers he received from St. Thomas Medical University. They were perfect, too perfect. Flesh still soft, joints still movable, skin showing no signs of decay. He had dissected hundreds of bodies in his career, but these were different. He wrote to Dr. James Walsh requesting a visit to observe their preservation methods. To learn, to understand, he said, and maybe even improve our own standards. But the moment his letter arrived at the Walsh estate, alarms went off. Chapter 2. The Smiling Mask. Dr. Michael Walsh welcomed Zimmermann with grace and charm. He gave him a tour of the main university building, the public anatomy lab, and even treated him to dinner at the family's country estate. Whatever you wish to see, Dr. Michael said. Street. Thomas is honored to share its knowledge with men of science. But behind closed doors, the Walsh family was panicking. Zimmermann was no priest. He couldn't be manipulated with religious talk or scared off with vague threats. He was a scientist. And worse, he was curious. Chapter 3. A staged demonstration. Dr. James Walsh prepared a staged demonstration for Zimmermann, a mock preservation procedure using an already dead body sourced from a local almshouse. The room was spotless, the tools carefully arranged, the chemicals, labeled and ordinary. James talked through each step as if reading from a textbook. Artery injection, organ flushing, alcohol soak, external coating. Zimmermann watched with polite interest. He took notes, asked questions, but inside, he was suspicious. The cadaver didn't match the ones he had received in Heidelberg. The muscle tissue was already stiff. The color faded. This was ordinary. Too ordinary. Chapter 4. The book that didn't belong. After the demonstration, Zimmermann was allowed to tour the university library. That's where he noticed something strange, a ledger, misfiled in a shelf behind old medical dictionaries. Inside were names, dozens of them, Patrick O'Brien, Samuel Keating, Elias Fisher. Next to each name, a date, a short note, and a number, always ending in, shipped. Zimmermann took a mental photograph of the page before one of the student assistants came over, quickly closing the book. That's not for public viewing, the boy said nervously. Zimmermann apologized, but he knew exactly what he had seen. Chapter 5. A question too far. The next morning, Zimmermann confronted James Walsh in private. Calm but direct. I've noticed something about the preservation. The specimens you send, they are preserved before death would allow natural stiffness. They show no signs of prior decay. No bruising, no trauma. Then he asked the question that would nearly cost him his life. Are your specimens truly dead when preservation begins? James froze, just for a second, then smiled. Doctor, I think your travels may have exhausted you. Perhaps you need rest. Zimmermann nodded, but the trap had been triggered. Chapter 6. The Midnight Escape. That night, Zimmermann was scheduled to stay in the guest quarters of the university. But something didn't sit right. He packed his things quietly, then walked the halls, just once. He listened at the door of James Walsh's office. Heard muffled voices, heard the word, chloroform. He left. Zimmermann paid a local carriage driver in gold coins to take him to Baltimore, immediately. No questions, no stops. By dawn, he was gone. Chapter 7. The Letter to Heidelberg. Back in Germany, Zimmermann wrote a long, sealed letter to the academic board at the University of Heidelberg. He did not accuse. He did not speculate. Instead, he posed questions. Why were only the St. Thomas cadavers preserved with such advanced technique? Why were the names of supposed dropouts never found in immigration or hospital records? Why were so many of the bodies young, male, and in excellent health? He advised that future orders from St. Thomas be paused, until further inspection could be done. It was the first time a major client cut ties with the Walsh family. Chapter 8. A dangerous reputation. The loss of Heidelberg's business was a blow. Not just financially, but reputationally. The Walshes had built their brand on secrecy. Now, whispers were spreading across Europe. Other schools, Paris, London, even Dublin, began asking quiet questions. Where were the bodies really coming from? But business didn't stop. Because for every professor with doubts, there were 3 more who just wanted results. Chapter 9. A new level of darkness. The near exposure forced the Walsh family to go darker. Quieter. Smarter. They limited their exports, raised prices even higher, and began using intermediaries to disguise the source of their cadavers. No more direct shipping from St. Thomas. Now it came through academic partners, in Baltimore and Philadelphia. But they also doubled down on one chilling strategy, perfecting the psychological profiles of their victims. Students weren't just selected randomly. They were studied, emotionally, financially, spiritually. They looked for young men at the edge of despair. And then they pushed them over it. Teaser for Part 4 to 1 minute. In Part 4, we'll learn how the Walsh family began manipulating not just individual students, but entire class dynamics. They used fear, pressure, and even spiritual manipulation to isolate their targets. And we'll uncover the heartbreaking story of Elias Fisher, a gifted student from New York, who trusted too much, and ended up on the wrong table. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. Because the next part will break your heart, and shake your soul. Short recap plus new hook 1 minute. In Part 3, German anatomist Drive. Heinrich Zimmermann nearly exposed the dark secrets of St. Thomas Medical University. His suspicious visit, followed by a narrow escape, forced the Walsh family to evolve. They tightened their operations, raised their prices, hid behind intermediaries, but they also grew more precise. Their next phase wasn't about hiding bodies, it was about perfecting the psychology of their victims. And at the center of this next wave of horror, was Elias Fisher. Part 4. The Isolation of Elias Fisher, 28 minutes. Chapter 1. The Brightest Star. Elias Fisher arrived at St. Thomas in the fall of 1823. He was 19, half Jewish, half Catholic, raised in a crowded tenement in Manhattan by his mother, a seamstress. Elias was gifted. He could memorize entire anatomy texts in days. He quoted Latin. He played violin. But what made him stand out most wasn't his brilliance, it was his kindness. Professors adored his essays. Students asked him for help. Even Drive, Michael Walsh had taken a quiet interest in him, often praising him during chapel services. But with admiration came something else. Surveillance. Because Elias matched the new criteria perfectly. From out of state, no wealthy family, no father, and just enough emotional vulnerability to be manipulated. Chapter 2. The Gentle Trap. During his second year, Elias was offered a position in the university's Advanced Study Fellowship, an elite, invitation-only program led by Dr. James Walsh himself. It was presented as an honor. Special anatomy access, private instruction, stipend for assisting with cadaver work. But behind the closed doors of the fellowship, things felt different. James Walsh began to test Elias emotionally. Assigned him solo dissections late at night. Forced him to write reflections on the moral silence of the dead. Introduced him to controversial European philosophies about death and the soul. Elias was praised publicly but pushed privately. Slowly, his routine changed. Less time with classmates, more time in the lower levels of the school, longer hours in the dissecting room, and visits to the basement he never spoke of. Chapter 3. Letters never sent. Elias used to write to his mother every Sunday. But after joining the fellowship, the letters stopped. Instead, the Walshes began sending their own updates. Elias is focused. Elias is growing into a remarkable physician. He thanks you for your prayers. None of it was true. In reality, Elias had begun experiencing hallucinations. He told one classmate he sometimes saw faces in the jars of preserved specimens. He started skipping meals, spoke to himself in Latin, refused to leave the lab for days. One student reported it to Margaret Walsh. Her response, some of our finest doctors go through this. Leave him be. Chapter 4. The Breaking Point. In February 1824, during an evening anatomy session, Elias fainted. Not from blood, not from exhaustion, but from what he claimed was a vision. He saw Patrick O'Brien, smiling and still, on the slab beside him. James Walsh later wrote in his private notes. Fisher is close. The spirit is fraying. Soon he will fall gently. That same week, Elias told a fellow student. Sometimes I think I'm already dead. That I'm just watching myself walk around. 2 nights later, Elias disappeared. Chapter 5. The Cover Story. The Walsh family's explanation was swift and predictable. Elias suffered a mental collapse. He expressed shame over his performance. He has gone to Philadelphia to seek spiritual renewal and pursue writing. A letter was sent to his mother. Signed in Elias's hand, but it wasn't his handwriting. It was James Walsh's, carefully imitating Elias's looping script. When his mother came to Maryland weeks later, desperate for answers, she was told that Elias had sold his violin, given away his books, and vanished without a trace. Margaret Walsh showed her the letter. Spoke softly, even offered her money for the return journey. Heartbroken, the woman left, never knowing her son's body was already on a ship bound for Vienna, labeled, subject number 173. Chapter 6. A better product. Elias's body was one of the finest they'd ever preserved. No signs of violence. Perfect musculature. Youthful face. Intact skin. He brought in $900, nearly 5 years' income for the average laborer. Doctors in Vienna marveled at the specimen. One even called it, greater than, a holy gift of anatomical clarity. They had no idea it was murder. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. Inside Street. Thomas, no memorial was held. No ceremony. No plaque. His name was quietly removed from the roster. But one student, Daniel Mallory, a close friend of Elias, didn't believe the story. He knew Elias had been planning to apply for a surgical internship in New York. He knew Elias wasn't suicidal. And he remembered something Elias once whispered during a dissection. Greater than, if I disappear, find the bookshelf in Dr. Walsh's office. Not all doors open with keys. Teaser for Part 5 to 1 minute. In Part 5, Daniel Mallory begins to investigate Elias's disappearance, and what he finds will place him in grave danger. For the first time, someone inside the university begins pulling at the threads. And what he uncovers will bring him face to face with the hidden chamber, and the ghosts of those who never left. Be sure to subscribe, because the next part will bring us closer than ever to the moment everything begins to collapse. Recap plus fresh hook 1 minute. Elias Fisher was one of the most promising students at St. Thomas Medical University, until he joined the elite fellowship program, vanished mysteriously, and was declared mentally unstable by the Walshes. But his closest friend, Daniel Mallory, didn't believe the story. Before Elias disappeared, he whispered a clue. Greater than, if I disappear, find the bookshelf in Dr. Walsh's office. Not all doors open with keys. And now, Daniel is ready to take the risk, because the truth is calling from below. Part 5. Daniel Mallory's Secret, 28 minutes. Chapter 1. The Outsider Within. Daniel Mallory wasn't the type to cause trouble. He was from Ohio, son of a Methodist farmer. Quiet, clean-cut, top of his class. He kept his head down, attended mass, and followed every rule. But Elias's disappearance changed him. The official story made no sense. Elias had been planning his surgical internship. His notebooks were full of future goals. He was nervous, but not unstable. And then there was that cryptic message, about a bookshelf. Chapter 2. The Office After Hours. Late one evening, Daniel waited until most of the faculty had left. He slipped into the administration hall using a set of skeleton keys he had borrowed from the janitor's closet weeks earlier, just in case. Dr. James Walsh's office was locked, but the old doors were no match for Daniel's determination. Inside, shelves full of books, surgical models, and a grandfather clock ticking softly in the corner. He scanned the room, then he saw it, a thick mahogany bookshelf behind the desk, different from the rest. The floor beneath it had drag marks. Daniel pressed his hands against the edge. Nothing. Then he reached to the third row, ran his fingers along the spines, and found it. A book with no title. He pulled it. Click. The entire shelf moved, groaning on hidden hinges. Behind it, a dark passageway leading downward. Chapter 3. The Chamber Below. Daniel lit a match and stepped into the narrow stone stairwell. The air grew cold, damp, metallic. At the bottom was a heavy wooden door, unlocked. He opened it, and entered the Walsh family's secret. A hidden laboratory, larger than any lecture hall. Dissection tables, surgical trays, jars of organs, glass tanks containing preserved limbs. And in the corner, a wall of labeled drawers, each with a student's name and date. Greater than, O'Brien, P. Fisher, E. Keating, S. Daniel's hands trembled. He opened one of the drawers. Inside was a notebook, Elias's handwriting, full of frantic notes. Greater than, they watch me sleep. The gas smells sweet before I go numb. James says I am the perfect candidate. God help me, they plan to use me next week. Suddenly, Daniel heard footsteps. Chapter 4. The Escape. He blew out the match, shoved Elias's notebook into his coat, and ducked behind a shelf just as James Walsh entered with 2 assistants. They wheeled in a covered gurney. I want this one prepped for Amsterdam, James said. No facial damage. He's a clean specimen. They removed the cover. It was a student Daniel recognized, Victor Chan, a third-year who'd supposedly gone home to San Francisco last week. Daniel's stomach turned. He waited until they left, then crept out and retraced his steps to the office above. He locked the office behind him and vanished into the night. Chapter 5. The priest returns. Daniel didn't go to the sheriff. He knew better. He went to Father Timothy O'Malley, the same priest who had investigated the university years ago. Now older and ill, Father O'Malley listened carefully as Daniel read him excerpts from Elias's notebook. He wept. "I knew," the priest whispered. "I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it. I failed them." Daniel and the priest made a plan. Gather evidence, document the chamber, and contact the church and press. But they needed time, quiet investigation, careful moves. Until then, Daniel would play his role as the obedient student. But inside, he was preparing for war. Chapter 6. The missing pages. Back at the university, Daniel began collecting more proof. He stole files, copied records, interviewed students whose roommates had left suddenly. But one night, someone broke into his room. His drawers had been searched. His trunk, overturned. Elias's notebook, gone. Daniel's blood ran cold. Whoever had taken it, knew. Chapter 7. The warning. 2 days later, Daniel found a letter under his pillow. No envelope, no name. It read, "Greater than, stop digging. The body you're looking for could be your own." But Daniel didn't stop. He knew he had touched a nerve. The Walsh family had built their empire on silence. But now, one voice, Daniel's, was beginning to echo through their carefully crafted halls. Teaser for Part 6 to 1 minute. In Part 6, Daniel prepares to expose the truth, but the Walsh family isn't about to let him walk away. New victims vanish, old allies disappear, and the chamber below grows darker, hungrier. Next time, the line between student and specimen begins to blur. Subscribe now, because the Walsh family's secret may not stay buried much longer. Short recap plus new hook 1 minute. In Part 5, Daniel Mallory discovered the hidden anatomy chamber beneath Drive. James Walsh's office. He saw preserved bodies of missing students. Read Elias Fisher's final notes. Escaped just before being caught. But when Elias's notebook was stolen from Daniel's dorm, everything changed. A warning note appeared under his pillow. Greater than, stop digging. The body you're looking for could be your own. And now, Daniel must decide, run or fight. Part 6. The Chamber Watches Back, 28 minutes. Chapter 1. A Ghost Among the Living. Daniel changed after that night. He stopped eating with classmates. Stopped answering questions in class. Avoided eye contact with faculty. But behind the silence, he was documenting everything. Names of students who disappeared. Changes in shipping schedules at the Baltimore dock. Notes on Dr. James Walsh's movements. He used a coded journal, hiding it in a broken floorboard beneath his bed. He trusted no one, not even his roommate. Chapter 2. The disappearances accelerate. By spring 1824, something terrifying happened. More students vanished, faster than ever before. Victor Chan, officially, transferred. Leo Munoz, quit the program due to illness. Anthony Reardon, homesick, returned to Chicago. All untrue. Daniel knew these boys. He had spoken to them days earlier. One even asked him, "Greater than, do you ever feel like someone's studying us?" Within 2 weeks, all 3 were gone. And Daniel wasn't the only one noticing. Chapter 3. The Candlelight Meeting. A small group of students approached Daniel late one night. They met in the university chapel by candlelight. "We don't believe the school anymore," one whispered. "They lied about Victor. He left his Bible behind. He never would have done that." "We want to help," said another. "Tell us what you know." Daniel hesitated, then revealed everything. The secret passage, the lab, the bodies, the ledger with names. Together, they planned to get photographic evidence using one student's smuggled camera device, a bulky, fragile box, barely usable, but it might work. They would return to the chamber as a group. But someone was listening. Chapter 4. Betrayal. 2 days later, before the plan could unfold, one of the students, Joseph Renner, was found dead. He had fallen from the university's third-floor stairwell. Authorities called it an accident. Daniel didn't believe it for a second. And then, 2 others from the group received anonymous letters, like the one Daniel had found. They dropped out of the investigation. Within a week, Daniel was alone again. Except now, he was being followed. Chapter 5. The Mirror Trick. In the anatomy lab, Daniel started noticing strange things. His locker was rearranged. His surgical tools were cleaned, though he hadn't touched them. Once, a student model in the corner of the lab had its eyes turned toward him. Then, one night, he set a mirror against the door of his dorm, an old trick his father had taught him. In the morning, the mirror was cracked. Someone had been inside, and they wanted him to know it. Chapter 6. The Missing Priest. Daniel wrote to Father O'Malley, begging him to return. But weeks passed with no answer. Finally, he got a reply, but it wasn't from O'Malley. It was from a parish in Boston. Greater than, Father O'Malley passed away 2 weeks ago from a sudden illness. May he rest in peace. Daniel didn't believe it. O'Malley had been healthy when they spoke. Cautious. Afraid, yes, but not dying. Daniel suspected foul play, poison, silencing. The Walsh family had resources, and reach. Chapter 7. A Whisper Through the Wall. One night, while hiding in the university archives, Daniel fell asleep behind a cabinet. He woke to voices, muffled, in the wall. It was James Walsh. Greater than, he's alone now. The others fled, but we have to be careful. He knows too much. Another voice replied, greater than, shall we prepare him? James laughed. Greater than, not yet. Let's break him first. Daniel covered his mouth to keep from screaming. Cliffhanger ending 1 minute. In the final scene of part 6, Daniel returns to his dorm to find his coded journal missing. The floorboard has been sealed shut. But lying on his bed is something worse. A surgical gown, clean, folded, with a note on top. Greater than, tomorrow, you assist in your final dissection. Teaser for part 7 to 1 minute. In part 7, Daniel is dragged into the operating theater, not as a student, but as the subject. Will he escape the Walsh family's grip? Or has he wandered too far into the chamber of death? The hunt is over. The walls are closing in. Subscribe now, because the next part is the beginning of the end. Short recap plus new hook 1 minute. Daniel Mallory has spent months uncovering the horrific secrets beneath St. Thomas Medical University, preserved bodies, fake student withdrawals, and a hidden chamber where the Walsh family performs their most terrifying work. He tried to expose them. He tried to run, but now, they're ready for him. And they've left him a final message. Greater than, tomorrow, you assist in your final dissection. Part 7. The Dissection of Daniel Mallory, 28 minutes. Chapter 1. The calm before. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He stared at the surgical gown folded on his bed. At sunrise, bells rang across campus. The day moved forward like nothing was wrong. Lectures, prayers, breakfast, laughter in the halls. But Daniel felt it in the air. He was being watched. Studied, prepared. He thought about running. But where? The sheriff was useless. His letters to the press had gone unanswered. The priest who once helped him was now dead. He had one option left. Chapter 2. The Fire Plan. Daniel had hidden a single vial of ether, stolen weeks ago from the surgery lab. He carried it in his coat pocket, wrapped in a torn page from Elias Fisher's journal. The plan was simple. Play along. Enter the chamber. Wait for a moment alone. Start a fire. Destroy everything. He knew he might not survive. But he was done being afraid. Chapter 3. A Surgical Invitation. At noon, drive, James Walsh approached him in the courtyard. Smiling. Greater than, Mr. Mallory, we've selected you for today's private dissection. Consider it an honor. Daniel nodded, played dumb, walked beside him. The hallways felt like tunnels now. Silent, cold, full of ghosts. They reached James Walsh's office. The bookshelf opened. Down the stairs they went. Chapter 4. The Cold Table. The secret chamber was cleaner than Daniel remembered. 3 new dissection tables stood in the center. 2 assistants stood ready, masked and silent. 1 table was empty. The other 2 held bodies of students Daniel had known. Victor, Anthony, preserved, still, expressionless. James motioned to the empty table. Greater than, take off your coat. Lay down. Daniel paused, then slowly complied. He felt the cold steel beneath him. Heard the clink of surgical tools. James leaned over him, holding a cloth. Greater than, let us begin. Chapter 5. The Turn. As James moved the cloth toward Daniel's face, Daniel moved faster. He struck the vial of ether against the edge of the table, shattering it, and hurled it toward the open flame of the preservation burner. Boom! Flames erupted across the floor. A shelf of chemicals exploded. James screamed as fire licked his coat. The assistants scrambled. Daniel leapt from the table, dodging a falling tray. He ran toward the stairs, flames chasing him. Chapter 6. The Chase. Smoke filled the corridor. Daniel burst into the office above, coughing, eyes burning. He ran down the main hallway of the university, past stunned students, toward the front gate. But someone tackled him from behind. It was Dr. Michael Walsh. Greater than, you think this ends with fire? We are medicine, boy. You are nothing. Daniel reached into his boot, pulled a scalpel. One strike across Michael's thigh. The old man howled. Daniel escaped his grip and ran. Out the gate, down the road, into the forest. He didn't stop until nightfall. Chapter 7. A refuge with a price. Daniel reached a Catholic mission house 12 miles away. The priests there took him in, fed him, treated his wounds. When he told them his story, they listened in stunned silence. Then one priest stepped forward, Father Albert. Greater than, you are not the first to run from St. Thomas. We've heard whispers for years. Daniel begged them to help him reach Baltimore. He had to tell someone. The newspapers, the church, anyone. Father Albert agreed. Greater than, rest tonight. We leave at dawn. Final twist 1 minute. That night, Daniel lay on a cot in a quiet stone room. But just before dawn, he heard something. Whispers. Footsteps. He got up, opened the door, and saw Father Albert speaking to Dr. Michael Walsh at the back gate. Teaser for Part 8 to 1 minute. In Part 8, Daniel discovers that the Walsh family's influence spreads even beyond Emmitsburg. The church, the law, even trusted allies, many are already under their control. But Daniel's about to find someone he never expected. A woman who once wore the Walsh name, and now wants it to burn. Subscribe now, because the war for truth has begun. Headphone, betrayed by priests, hunted by surgeons, and nearly burned alive. In Part 8, Daniel Mallory escapes death once again, but his next ally is someone no one expected. A woman who once helped build the Walsh family's empire, and now wants to destroy it. Short recap plus hook 1 minute. Daniel Mallory nearly became the next dissected student in the secret chamber beneath St. Thomas Medical University, but he fought back, setting the chamber on fire and escaping into the forest. He thought he found safety at a Catholic mission house, until he saw Father Albert shaking hands with Dr. Michael Walsh at the back gate. The Walsh family had eyes everywhere. But Daniel was about to meet someone he never expected, a woman with the knowledge, power, and fury to bring the empire crashing down. Her name was Dr. Cecilia Walsh, Michael Walsh's daughter. Part 8. The Woman Who Broke the Oath, 28 minutes. Chapter 1. The Carriage in the Rain. Daniel didn't wait to confront Father Albert. He slipped out the back, ran to the woods, and followed the road east until his legs gave out. Somewhere near Taneytown, rain began to fall. Hard. A carriage approached from behind, plain, black, drawn by 2 slow-moving horses. Daniel flagged it down. The driver, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and black gloves, didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, Greater than, get in, Mr. Mallory. I've been expecting you. Chapter 2. The Hidden House. She took him to a remote brick house tucked into the trees, stone chimneys, shuttered windows, candlelight inside. Books lined every wall, medical texts, surgical drawings, preserved fetal specimens in jars. Daniel sat near the fire, soaked and shivering. The woman poured tea. Greater than, I'm Cecilia Walsh, Michael's daughter, James's niece, Margaret's former student, and for the last 10 years, their quiet enemy. Daniel was stunned. He had never heard of her. Chapter 3. Bloodlines and Betrayal. Cecilia told her story. She was once St. Thomas's brightest student. She had studied anatomy beside her uncle James. Even helped develop early versions of the preservation formula. But one night, in 1814, she found out the truth. She discovered a body in the hidden chamber, someone she knew. A classmate, a friend. When she confronted her father, he didn't deny it. Greater than, he said, you're either part of the cure, or part of the waste. Cecilia left the university that night and never returned. For a decade, she had lived in hiding, documenting the family's operations, collecting rumors from dockworkers and former students, bribing church contacts. And now, with Daniel's escape, she knew the time had come. Greater than, they won't stop hunting you, she said. So we hit back first. Chapter 4. The Black Book. Cecilia handed Daniel a worn leather book. Inside were shipping records, ledger copies of bodies sold, receipts signed by European universities, Names of every victim since 1799. Daniel stared at it. Proof. Real proof. Greater than, we send this to every major newspaper, he said. But Cecilia shook her head. Greater than, we'll do more than that. We'll send it, with a body. Chapter 5. The plan. Cecilia had a contact in Baltimore's harbor, a Dutch sailor named Willem who helped her track illegal shipments. A new vessel was arriving in 6 days. It would carry preserved, medical specimens, from St. Thomas to The Hague. They would intercept the shipment, expose its contents, leak it to the public. But first, they had to survive the week. Chapter 6. A house under siege. That night, while Daniel slept, Cecilia watched from the second-floor window. In the woods below, she saw movement. A figure, then another, and then, a fire arrow hit the barn. The Walsh family had found them. Chapter 7. Smoke and steel. Cecilia shoved Daniel awake. Greater than, we fight. Or we burn. She handed him a revolver and a vial of the original preservation formula, now modified to act as an acid. Outside, masked men approached. One was unmistakable. Dr. James Walsh. The hunter had come in person. Cliffhanger 1 minute. A bullet shattered the window. James's voice echoed from the dark. Greater than, you can't run, Daniel. We own the blood in your veins. And you, drive. Cecilia, should have never betrayed your oath. The house was surrounded. The flames were rising. But inside that house, the rebellion had already begun. Teaser for Part 9 to 1 minute. In Part 9, Cecilia and Daniel launch a daring plan to expose the entire Walsh Empire. But with the university still operating, and the church still silent, they must risk everything to make sure the truth finally reaches the world. The ship is coming, the bodies are waiting, and the final chapter is drawing near. Subscribe now, because next time, the ghosts of St. Thomas rise. Headphone, they've survived the fire. They've escaped the knives. Now, they're going to war. In Part 9, Daniel and Cecilia launch a bold mission to expose America's darkest medical secret, by hijacking the final shipment bound for Europe. Short recap plus hook 1 minute. In Part 8, Daniel Mallory found his most unlikely ally, Drive. Cecilia Walsh, the daughter of Michael Walsh, who once helped build the empire she now wants to destroy. Together, they fought off a brutal ambush by James Walsh and his hired men. But the clock is ticking. A cargo ship filled with human bodies, preserved in secret beneath St. Thomas Medical University, is set to sail from Baltimore in just 5 days. And if they don't stop it, the truth dies at sea. Part 9. The Ship of Shadows, 28 minutes. Chapter 1. A plan built on fire and ink. Inside Cecilia's candlelit study, Daniel and Cecilia huddled over a map of Baltimore's inner harbor. She pointed to a docking ledger she had bribed from a shipping clerk. Greater than, the vessel is called the Amity. Registered as transporting medical instructional cargo to The Hague. Departure 5 days from today, midnight. They had one chance. Sneak aboard the ship the night before. Replace the crates of preserved cadavers with documentation and evidence. Alert the press, the authorities, and one final secret weapon. Chapter 2. The Reporter. Cecilia had a friend from her university days, Elizabeth Raines, one of the few female journalists working for the Baltimore Gazette. They met her in a quiet alley behind a bookshop. Elizabeth listened to the story, flipping through pages of shipping logs, preservation formulas, and victim lists. When she saw Patrick O'Brien's name, the student who vanished in 1799, her voice cracked. Greater than, my grandfather, was his cousin. She agreed to publish the story. But she warned. Greater than, you only get one shot. If the press gets cold feet, or if the ship leaves port, you'll disappear. Just like them. Chapter 3. The Return to Emmitsburg. Cecilia insisted they make one final trip, to St. Thomas Medical University itself. She wanted one last thing. Inside the ruins of the old chamber, now scorched from Daniel's fire, they retrieved the original scalpel used by Dr. James Walsh, a preserved heart with a tag reading, O'Brien, Patrick, and most importantly, a sealed ledger, handwritten by Margaret Walsh, detailing over 150 student dissections. Greater than, this, Cecilia said, is the heart of the monster. Chapter 4. A Town Awakens. On their way to Baltimore, they stopped in several small towns, Emmitsburg, Taneytown, Frederick, and showed the evidence to priests, teachers, even bartenders. Whispers spread like wildfire. Greater than, the Walsh family's killing students. That school's a tomb. My cousin vanished there in 1812. By the time Daniel and Cecilia reached the city, rumors were already moving faster than horses. Chapter 5. The Shipyard. On the night of July 2, 1834, Daniel, Cecilia, and Elizabeth arrived at Baltimore's inner harbor. The Amity stood like a ghost, black hull, no flag, crew quiet as corpses. They waited until midnight. Then, under the fog of smoke and silence, they boarded. Below deck, in a freezing hold filled with salt and ice, they found the truth. 17 bodies, all preserved, all labeled as educational samples. All young men. Daniel recognized one of them. Victor Chan. He covered his mouth, trembling. Greater than, we have to end this. Tonight. Chapter 6. The Switch. For the next 2 hours, they worked in silence. Removed the crates one by one. Replaced them with labeled boxes full of evidence, names, photos, receipts, letters. Left a final note inside the captain's cabin. Greater than, to the Royal College of Surgeons in London. The price of knowledge should not be murder. The dead of St. Thomas. Then they lit a red flare, Elizabeth's signal to the Baltimore Gazette. Chapter 7. The World Sees. By sunrise, the docks were swarming. Police, reporters, church officials, dock workers, crowds. The Amity's hold was opened. 17 bodies, documents, the ledger, and pinned to one body's chest, a rosary, stained with blood. The press exploded. Headlines screamed across the East Coast. Medical school's secret chamber of death. Preserved for profit. The Walsh family scandal. Cadavers sold abroad. Students never came home. Cliffhanger 1 minute. But even as the story went public, one man escaped justice. Dr. James Walsh vanished the night the ship was exposed. Rumors said he boarded a smaller boat toward Cuba. Others claimed he slit his own throat in the woods. But Cecilia knew better. Greater than, he's still alive, she told Daniel. And if we don't finish this, he'll rebuild everything. Teaser for part 10 to 1 minute. In the final chapter of the Walsh family medical empire, Daniel Mallory must face the last living architect of the horror, and decide once and for all whether justice means exposure, or revenge. The past is no longer buried. Now, it wants blood. Subscribe now, because next time, the chamber finally closes. Headphone, the world knows the truth. The bodies are found, the empire is crumbling, but one man still holds the scalpel. In part 10, Daniel Mallory confronts the final architect of horror, and the Walsh legacy meets its end. Final recap plus opening hook 1 minute. The secret chamber is exposed. The cadavers have been found. The newspapers scream the truth across the world. St. Thomas Medical University is shut down. Its board disbands. The Catholic Church, under immense pressure, orders an official investigation. But one man is still out there. Dr. James Walsh, the surgeon who killed 156 students for profit, for science, and for power. He didn't die in the fire. He didn't flee the country. He's been hiding, in plain sight. And now, Daniel Mallory has to finish what the others never could. Part 10. The Last Cut, 28 minutes. Chapter 1. A stranger in the crowd. 3 weeks after the ship was exposed, Daniel returned to Emmitsburg for the university's demolition. Crowds gathered. Journalists snapped photos. Former students cried as the bell tower was torn down. But as Daniel stood near the edge of the crowd, he noticed something. A man in a black coat. Tall, pale, holding a surgeon's bag. He locked eyes with Daniel. It was James Walsh. Chapter 2. The Final Invitation. That night, Daniel found a letter slipped beneath his inn door. Greater than, one final lesson. Where it began. Midnight. JW. He didn't tell Cecilia. He didn't alert the police. He knew James. This wasn't a threat. It was a challenge. Chapter 3. The Ruins. At midnight, Daniel stepped into the ruins of St. Thomas Medical University. The fire had destroyed most of the interior, but the basement remained. And there, in the flickering light of a single lantern, stood Drive. James Walsh, dressed in a blood-stained white coat, scalpel in hand. Greater than, you learned well, Mallory, he said. But are you ready to cut truth from legend? Chapter 4. The Final Dissection. James wasn't there to kill. He was there to justify. He walked Daniel through every preserved body. Every record. Every cut. He believed he had done God's work. Greater than, I gave the world its finest surgeons. Its finest studies. What's 156 lost, when thousands are healed? Daniel listened, silent, numb. Then he said, Greater than, you didn't make doctors. You made ghosts. And with that, Daniel drew his revolver. But James didn't flinch. Greater than, if you want justice, shoot me. But if you want truth, record me. Chapter 5. The Confession. Daniel did something no one expected. He pulled out Cecilia's journal. And began writing. For 2 hours, James talked. He named every victim. Described every method. Every shipment. Every bribe. He wept once, when he spoke of Margaret, his sister. Greater than, she died believing in the mission. I die knowing it was a lie. When it was over, Daniel closed the book. Greater than, you've given your statement, Doctor. The world will read your obituary next. Chapter 6. The Final Act. James reached into his coat. Daniel tensed, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out a vial of chloroform. Greater than, one last demonstration, he whispered. Watch carefully. He poured it into a handkerchief. Pressed it to his face. And within seconds, fell. Dr. James Walsh died on the same table where he once killed his students. Chapter 7. The Legacy Shattered. Daniel and Cecilia submitted the final journal and confession to the Maryland Medical Board, the Archdiocese of Baltimore, and every major newspaper on the East Coast. Within months, the Walsh name was erased from every medical honor roll. Street. Thomas was condemned, its grounds turned into a memorial for the missing. European universities returned over 70 bodies for reburial. A national law was passed requiring full transparency for all medical cadavers. Elizabeth Raines won the first ever American Press Freedom Medal for her reporting. Cecilia Walsh, finally freed from the family shame, founded the Mallory Raines School of Ethical Medicine, the first institution in America to train doctors with full transparency and accountability. And Daniel, he never became a surgeon. But he became something greater. A storyteller. Final reflection 2 minutes. In 1834, a dock worker found 17 bodies in a ship's hold. But behind those 17 were 156 stolen lives. Behind those lives, an empire of silence, greed, and murder, all masked as medicine. But in the end, the truth surfaced. Because one man refused to look away. One woman refused to stay silent. And together, they made history bleed. End message 1 minute. Clapperboard. Thank you for watching The Walsh Family Medical Empire, a 10-part true horror story from America's forgotten past. If this story gripped you, subscribe now to this channel for more dark historical investigations. Let us know in the comments. Stethoscope, would you have exposed the truth, or walked away? And remember, history hides horrors. We uncover them.